Marshall in Nairobi. We'll bring you the details on those stories in just a moment, but first, Uche Okoronko with the day's business headlines. Uche.
Thank you, Beatrice. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. A Rwandese family sues Boeing over the deadly Ethiopian Airlines crash. And Nigeria plans a 50% tax hike to fund recently agreed wage increases for public servants. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, it's back to you, Beatrice.
Uche, thank you. And we begin in the United Kingdom, which has been plunged into more political uncertainty. British lawmakers have rejected Prime Minister Theresa May's Brexit deal for a third time this Friday.
The ayes to the right, 286. The noes to the left, 344. So the noes have it, the noes have it. Unlock.
On Monday, this House will continue the process to see if there is a stable majority for a particular alternative version of our future relationship with the EU. Of course, all of the options will require the withdrawal agreement. Mr. Speaker, I fear we are reaching the limits of this process in this House. This House has rejected no deal. It has rejected no Brexit. On Wednesday, it rejected all the variations of the deal on the table. And today, it has rejected approving the withdrawal agreement alone and continuing a process on the future. This government will continue to press the case for the orderly Brexit that the result of the referendum demands.
Well, the UK Parliament now plans to hold a series of votes on Monday in an attempt to find a new plan. Meanwhile, the European Council says EU leaders will meet on April the 10th to discuss the UK's departure, and that a no-deal scenario on April the 12th has become increasingly likely. Meanwhile, the UK's opposition party leader Jeremy Corbyn has called for Prime Minister Theresa May to resign after her Brexit deal was rejected in Parliament for a third time. Within minutes of the vote, European Council President and Summit Chair Donald Tusk tweeted that European Union leaders will meet on April 10th to discuss Britain's departure from the bloc.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. This is now the third time the Prime Minister's deal has been rejected. When he was defeated the first time, the Prime Minister said it's clear this House does not support the deal. Does she now finally accept that the House does not support the deal? Because she seemed to indicate just now that she's going to return to this issue again. On Monday, this House has the chance, and I say to all members, Mr. Speaker, the responsibility to find a majority for a better deal for all the people of this country. Mr. Speaker, the House has been clear. This deal now has to change. There has to be an alternative found. And if the Prime Minister can't accept that, then she must go, not at an indeterminate date in the future, but now, so that we can decide the future of this country through a general election.
Well, let's get more on the third rejection of the Brexit deal. I'm joined by CGTN's Richard Bestick in London. He's been covering this story from the very beginning. Richard, what a day for the United Kingdom, though. The political uncertainty is persisting there in the UK. What can you tell us about today's developments and exactly their implications?
It has been yet another hugely dramatic day, and you've got to ask yourself what damage is Brexit causing, not just here to the Brexit process, but to the very fibres of the British political and parliamentary institutions. The Prime Minister brought back her deal a third time. Parliament said again resoundingly no. And she then said, well, we've got to go on and find something. Now, the implications of this are that Britain has finally run out of road for that much talked about can the Prime Minister has been talking about, kicking all the way down. And they've got to go back now and see on Monday whether they can come up with an alternative. Now, it could be that Britain takes part in the European Union Customs Union, or perhaps another referendum even. And the Brexit chief negotiator for the European Union, Michel Barnier, talking in Poland, has been saying that that is something they could consider. They will be having an emergency council meeting in Brussels on March the 10th. Now that's just 2 days before Brexit, before Britain crashes out of the European Union without any deal whatsoever, with all the dramatic economic consequences warned of by the Bank of England and the UK Treasury. Watching the events on the outside today have been gathering crowds. I spoke to them earlier, increasingly angry. These people voted in their millions for Brexit, to leave the European Union. They now feel that they've been betrayed. They were saying to me that they seem to have lost their political voice. They were out in quite strong numbers and demanding that they get their Brexit. Well, that's now in some doubt, unless there is a mistake, someone drops the ball, and later, within 2 weeks, Britain does go for a no-deal Brexit. But certainly from Monday morning, they'll be working hard to ensure against that.
Well, Richard, so Britain has now run out of rope, so to speak. The markets also show discomfort there, the British pound dropping at this latest development. So what should we expect now going forward? And is a no-deal Brexit the only option now left for the United Kingdom?
It's not the only option. It is certainly one option. And Michel Barnier, talking in Poland, said that it's now got to be a real possibility. In Brussels, they're not regarding it now as a far off, a distant chance. They're regarding it as a real possibility. That's why he's offering a membership for Britain of a customs union. That might be something that Theresa May could sell to Labour MPs and say, look, we'll go for that if you come on board for my deal. So that's an area of negotiation. You have also, as you heard earlier there, Jeremy Corbyn, the opposition leader, suggesting maybe a general election. Well, it's very difficult to see what that would do. And then we come right back. If nothing can be decided, and it looks like Britain's going to crash out, because the members of Parliament in that place have set their face against a no-deal Brexit. They say they don't want the economic fallout that would come from no deal. They will now consider perhaps a second referendum. But the divisions around the cabinet table in government, around the political parties in Parliament and across the country remain huge and very, very angry.
Richard Bestick for us there in London with that latest development from the United Kingdom on Brexit. Thank you. Now, after more than 2 years of negotiations with the European Union, Britain's Parliament has repeatedly failed to agree on the terms of its departure, and the leave date has been extended. So what happens next? Our correspondent Richard Bestick again has more details.
Brexit, in its parliamentary infancy, was intended as a means of quieting a noisy and fractious element on the back benches of Britain's ruling Conservative Party. The then Prime Minister David Cameron hit on the idea of a one-off in-out referendum, which he believed would end once and for all the decades-old civil war inside his party. What could possibly go wrong? In defeat, David Cameron quit. New broom Theresa May brushed into the top job, complete with a reassuringly uncomplicated message.
Brexit means Brexit.
May promised to trigger the Brexit process quickly, the speed of which, in hindsight, a mistake according to some political observers.
She was a Remainer in the referendum, so her first priority was to ingratiate herself with the Brexiters in her own party, which meant that in October 2016, her party conference speech, she laid down those very red lines. She did that without really understanding what that meant.
May lost sympathy and a Supreme Court ruling when she tried to bypass Parliament and start the Brexit process, making it harder with a general election that lost her parliamentary majority. Salvaging it required a $1.3 billion deal with the 10 MPs of the Democratic Unionists in Northern Ireland, where ultimately May's Brexit plan would collide with the Irish backstop, a device to ensure no return to a physical border with the Irish Republic to the south.
This is not Brexit.
Anger spilled over into a leadership challenge on May.
The parliamentary party does have confidence.
Much applause for May's victory, but she was damaged, with a third of her own parliamentary party voting against her. And when her Brexit deal went before Parliament, not once but twice, it was resoundingly rejected. Members of Parliament have commandeered the Brexit agenda with ideas of their own, and May has said she'd resign if only Parliament would vote for her deal. Brexit has already been a long and winding road with no ultimate destination yet in sight. It's already taken the scalp of one British Prime Minister, and another is apparently on her way to the exit. The big question, though, is whether it's politics and it'll pass, or whether Brexit really is eating at the fibres of Britain's ancient political institutions. Richard Bestick, CGTN, London.
Well, the Brexit process is also being closely monitored in Africa. Last year, UK Prime Minister Theresa May made her first visit to Africa to push for a number of post-Brexit deals. However, many of those deals have been left hanging and can only be activated once the UK takes a firm decision on its separation with the European Union. Sumitra Naidu now takes a look at how South Africa is preparing for Brexit.
South Africa has put together a number of scenarios in an effort to prepare accordingly, even if there is an exit without a deal.
The British have indicated that if that happens, there is a tariff, the tariffs they will apply themselves towards the rest of the world, and those are duty-free for everything except 469 lines, and that would mean for South African wine, fruit, and all kinds of vegetable-based products except for sugar, there would be no duties, so there would be no interruption in our trade for those products.
South Africa and the UK enjoy a solid trade relationship, and authorities here say they're not too concerned about Brexit as new deals will be negotiated. What is worrying, though, is ongoing investment. The UK is currently South Africa's largest source of foreign direct investment.
You're hoping that the UK doesn't suffer a lot through this Brexit issue, whichever what they decide to do. You're also hoping that if you decide to trade with another person, another country, that you're able to actually sell as much as possible. Unfortunately, some of the things that we sell have volatile prices and our earnings are hit, and that's why we have all these current account deficits.
The complications and difficulties that would arise would be in automotive products and components, where accumulation of inputs coming from the rest of the EU, from Britain, from us, all those issues would be extremely complicated and would be better solved if we could conclude our agreements.
Some experts believe a no-deal Brexit could be an advantage to countries negotiating new deals.
If the Brexit actually happens, they leave the EU, what will happen then is, the UK actually needs the world more than the world needs the UK. So you'll see there's a very interesting scenario where the UK would come to Nigeria, to Kenya and South Africa, for instance. They're some of the biggest economies in Africa to actually try and do deals there. So there's an opportunity there if you look at it as well, because then we could actually have win-win sort of trade agreements with the UK per se.
It's now wait and see. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, the business community in Nigeria is also closely watching to see the outcome of the Brexit process. Nigeria is a key trading partner of the United Kingdom and the European Union as well. Here's CGTN's Deji Badmus with more on that.
Nigerians are following the Brexit debate, but not with a very keen interest. Most of the people I have spoken to here don't really understand what exactly the issue is and why it has continued to drag on. For those who understand and have been following the debate keenly, they do not think Britain should leave the EU and would want to see another referendum conducted. Now, in terms of how Nigeria and indeed the entire African continent may be affected by Brexit. Some financial analysts think the country and the continent may be at the receiving end if it happens.
It depends on how the Brexit exit eventually ended, whether it's going to end with a no deal or with some level of agreement between Britain and the European Union. If it goes with no deal, if it ends with a no deal, and then you're going to see a situation where the European Union will take very drastic measures that work against Britain. Then we should also see a lot of shift by institutional investors away from London, which currently is the financial capital of Europe. So if that happens, you are going to see a situation where African economies will no longer, in the short term, be able to get a kind of funding, particularly portfolio investors that come from Britain to Africa. So you might see a situation where those investors will first of all focus on the European countries instead of focusing on Africa. Currently, the structure of most fund managers in Britain, many don't have funds earmarked for Africa. Should there be a drastic shift in their location and they are now subject to new tax regime, which is favorable towards the European Union, you might see a shift from a lot of investment coming to Africa to maybe going to European Union countries and possibly to other emerging economies.
The jury is actually still out on how much impact Brexit could have on Nigeria and the continent. The business community is following the debate very keenly, but most governments in Africa have been silent, at least publicly, not weighing in on the debate. It appears they are just adopting a wait-and-see attitude on this whole Brexit drama. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
It's been exactly 1 year since Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed came to power after former leader Haile Mariam Desalegne's resignation. Over the last 12 months, Abiy Ahmed has introduced unprecedented reforms to the Eastern African country, ranging from widening the political spectrum to economic liberalization. CGTN's Girum Chala looks back at some of the Prime Minister's successes and prevailing challenges.
Abiy Ahmed has released all political prisoners and journalists. He allowed a freedom of speech to be exercised after unblocking thousands of websites and blogs. He has reunited peoples of Ethiopia and Eritrea after peace has prevailed between the two states, which was absent for almost 2 decades. Abiy was in Djibouti, in Sudan, Egypt, Kenya, Uganda, Somalia, and the UAE, Saudi Arabia. He also went to the US, China, and many European states. This all was done in just less than 1 year. His moves reignited citizens' love for Ethiopia.
Not listening to one another, not being patient, building a wall of antagonism, these all have been working against us over the last 40 years. Today, what I beg of you fellow citizens is to demolish this wall and unite for a national cause.
Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has also introduced unprecedented political, economic and military reform to Ethiopia. Despite the success stories, however, Abiy's administration is still criticized.
Much of what we call the civil administration is now in a lot of areas are not working well. The so-called change has not reached people at the grassroots. So we have a lot of problems. In fact, I'm very cautiously optimistic.
Still, many believe Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed deserves nationwide support for him to deliver more.
We should take responsibility to advance the country one step further and change the status quo. If we can do that, I believe this country can be saved from the catastrophe ahead. We had an excellent start. We're indeed seeing the light at the end of the tunnel.
Ethiopia will soon go to general polls to elect its leaders who hold power for the coming 5 years. Many strongly believe Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is the one man who can carry Ethiopia to the future. Group Dara CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. Countries affected by the devastating tropical storm start rebuilding processes amid a surge of cholera cases in Mozambique. And a smart way of parking cars that is helping Egypt deal with limited space for millions of cars.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt,
along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Now, after weeks of flooding after a devastating cyclone, Mozambique is in the process of rebuilding and resettling hundreds of displaced citizens. President Filipe Nyusi says the country is tackling the effects from one of its biggest natural disasters in its history. More than 700 people have been reportedly killed across the three countries in Southeast Africa. Thousands of people were trapped for more than a week in submerged villages without access to clean water. The region may also have lost infrastructure worth more than $1 billion, according to the United Nations.
After 2 weeks of intense search and rescue work, the emergency response enters a new phase of providing humanitarian assistance to the families that need it. The work in the field continues intensely, with a focus on reopening access routes, re-establishing telecommunications, energy and water.
Meanwhile,
announced a range of measures to
the number of confirmed cases, cholera cases,
confirmed by Minister Cholera.
We go into a very critical phase now, which is assistance. This assistance will be done in 5 pillars, which is food, health, water, sanitation, and also shelter. We also want to make sure that communities that are capable and in conditions restore their livelihoods. So we'll be with some measurements that we'll be taking, like seeds and means for them to work, make sure that they get this.
Speaking about aid and cash donations directly to the government, the president spoke about transparency and accountability.
He didn't comment. He gave a direct order that all the assistance should be done with auditing, reporting, international agencies.
The country is still immersed in a debt scandal which saw the IMF pull its funding and bring Mozambique to the verge of financial collapse. And it's because of this that the president was so adamant.
I think INGC will do that process and make sure that it's done properly. This doesn't mean that we don't trust our institutions. It's to make sure that everybody is accountable, that we have information delivered to the public, and it's the way to do it, actually.
Aid agencies say that any measures to increase the efficiency of aid operations are welcomed.
The importance of governance can't be overstressed, and the president is making a point here that they want to do it all very transparently. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Beira, Mozambique.
Meanwhile, the number of confirmed cholera cases in cyclone-ravaged Mozambique has risen to more than 130. Authorities are planning a mass vaccination campaign to try and contain the spread of the deadly disease. About 1 million vaccines are expected in the country come Monday. 9 treatment centers are being set up around the central Sofala province, which bore the brunt of the cyclone. Cholera is an infectious disease that thrives in conditions of poor hygiene. It causes acute diarrhea that can be fatal if left untreated.
So we will be vaccinating 800,000 people. We have more than 100 cases already in the city of Beira, but we have no loss of lives in the centers. Unfortunately, yesterday we have 2 people that came already in bad conditions. They already lost their lives.
The town of Namatanda was also hard hit by Cyclone Idai. The town is situated just 100 kilometers northwest from Beira. One affected family is awaiting the arrival of a newborn baby, but the house where the mother and baby will be returning to misses a wall and has a damaged roof. CGTN's Tulisha Balala has more on recovery efforts in the country.
The family of Shano Bengala is waiting for their newborn baby to arrive home. Samuel Shao is now 7 days old. He was born a week after Cyclone Idai smashed into Mozambique on March 14th. The baby has problems with taking food and has to stay under doctor's watch.
I was very worried because we live very far away in Gorongosa. So when the cyclone arrived, I was worried about my daughter. She already had a big belly, but now fortunately I am happy as the baby is born.
The storm caused catastrophic flooding, damaged this hospital and destroyed thousands of homes. Many families face the same challenge as thousands of people are in need of food, water and shelter in Mozambique.
We had to adapt. We had no other choice. The roof flew away, so I had to go and catch the metal sheets and put them on the roof with concrete blocks on top of them.
For those with newborns and expecting the baby shortly, the demand for safety and access to health care is even higher. Hospitals are seriously damaged, lack supplies and are short-staffed.
The situation is better, but there's still women delivering by the roadsides on their way here, despite better access that we have now. We still don't have aid in full totality. I still feel we need more resources to be able to transfer patients here.
This hospital is the second largest medical facility in Sofala province. It is serving a population of 34,000 people, and some of the villages still have no way to reach for medical help in case of emergency. With 1.85 million people affected by the cyclone in Mozambique, the government needs help to restore basic maternal and child health care. Tuli Shabalala, CGTN.
Cyclone Idai has also caused a lot of devastation in neighboring Zimbabwe. Landslides and floods triggered by heavy rains caused serious damage to property, displacing thousands.
Since Cyclone Idai hit the eastern part of Zimbabwe, many villages like Kopa, located in Lusito area of Manicaland province, were left devastated and separated from the rest of the region. The only way for the people to access the village is a makeshift wooden bridge, despite apparent dangers of using it.
This makeshift bridge has a long queue, which has been extending for hours. Elderly people are frequently losing their balance while attempting to cross over to the other side. But there's no option. The bridges were swept away. If the responsible authorities could make firmer temporary bridges, then that would enable safety while crossing. At this juncture, we ask the government to swiftly facilitate an intervention. Right now, the people are risking their lives by crossing through this makeshift structure, which is made of logs.
This is just one of a long list of emergencies to respond to after the cyclone tore through the region.
Due to the heavy rains that were triggered by the storm, there was a lot of water. The volume of water accumulated and it was blocking the bridge and the stones. So when the water accumulated, the bridge burst out and the water flew to the place where people were residing, and it flattened everything. The stones, they broke the houses, and it was due to the storm. That's what we recognized, and there are people who were buried under the soil. and the stones are on top of the people. We really regret with the incident.
My house was right here where I'm standing. At that time, my wife and kids were the ones who were at home. My greatest desire is that of finding my family, whether alive or dead, so that I can give them a proper burial. That's all I wish for at this moment. Maybe that will bring closure and set my mind free.
The survivors are now facing a long wait, and the humanitarian situation is considerable. The affected area is very extensive, and it will be months before they begin to resettle into a new normal. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
A new resolution from the United Nations to combat the financing of terror groups has been adopted. Resolution 2462 is meant to curb innovative financing methods that have emerged from a global shift of terror networks.
The United Nations Security Council unanimously adopted the resolution to expand the focus to key emerging issues, including innovative terrorist financing methods.
Terrorism remains a threat to international peace and security from which no region is immune. Terrorist groups such as ISIL, Al-Qaeda, and their affiliates continue to obtain funding from a wide range of sources, and they use this funding to conduct terrorist attacks, but they also use it to maintain and grow their terrorist organizations as a whole.
Countries have been asked to criminalize terrorist financing, even in the absence of a link to a specific terrorist act. They have also been urged to look at all sectors that could be supporting the activities outside the finance industry.
We should all recognize that terrorist financing risks extend well beyond the banking and financial sector. States need to identify all sectors, including those of non-financial services such as construction, commodities, pharmaceutical trafficking, and other cases that are being exploited for terroristic purposes.
The United Nations Security Council, together with the Financial Action Task Force, is also looking into illicit financing risk associated with virtual currencies and related assets. The task force also hopes to enhance its work to counter the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. Terrorist groups are said to be adapting to new secret networks once their old ones are destroyed, making it hard to wipe them out.
It would be the greatest error to think that terrorism is conquered once its territorial claims have been destroyed. Al-Qaeda and Daesh, even when they shrink, they do not disappear. Quite the contrary, they adapt. We have managed to chase them away from their territories, but they have turned once again to clandestine networks. We have prevented them from crossing borders, but they use cyberspace to drive from abroad or to inspire right in the heart of our societies. They are artisans of their criminal projects.
The new resolution is seen as a step toward combating terrorism, but not an end in itself.
Given the shape-shifting threat and the constantly changing one that I have just described, we need to build the largest partnership possible, a partnership which brings together all of the concerned actors, states, the private sector, multilateral institutions, and civil society. This is the only kind of partnership that can bring a response that is at par with the challenge.
Russian Ambassador Vasily Nebenzia also stressed on the need to stop politicizing the anti-terrorism agenda, as well as halting provisions that come from states themselves.
As the network of terrorist syndicates in the Middle East is being done away, we are finding facts of various kinds of supplies and provisions to terrorists in Syria and Iraq, including by states. The gamut of such unsavory behavior is wide, and it ranges from the supply of so-called non-lethal assistance to concealing the cooperation between one's companies and fighters. Ultimately, the states which are using double standards and which politicize the anti-terrorism agenda run themselves the risk of becoming the target of terrorism, and this is something that people should think ahead.
ISIL, Al-Qaeda, and their affiliates continue to obtain funding from a wide range of sources. This helps them to maintain and grow their terrorist organizations. The United Nations hopes that this latest resolution will be a substantial step toward combating the financing and growth of the groups and their links. Brian Toussaint, CGTN.
Africa's first Chinese paintings and Asian works of art workshop has been launched in Djibouti. The Luban Workshop is a vocational training school which provides skills mainly to the youth. The initiative aims at supporting technological training and promoting youth innovation and entrepreneurship. The workshop was created by the China Civil Engineering Construction Group. It will be academically supported by Tianjin First College of Commerce and Tianjin Railway Technical and Vocational College. Djibouti's President Ismail Omar Guelleh, Chinese Ambassador to Djibouti Shuo Risheng, and the President of China Civil Engineering Construction Corporation, Yuan Li, were among those who took part in the opening ceremony.
The Addis Ababa-Djibouti Railway has brought us many opportunities and challenges and has also developed the transportation and port logistics industry. Djibouti needs new technology and upgraded economic development. I hope the Luban Workshop will bring a win-win situation for the economic development of China and Djibouti.
Luban Workshop is a vocational training school which provides education and skills training for African youth. It reflects the further advancement of the Belt and Road in Djibouti.
Operation of the railway requires dispatching, trained drivers, maintenance of railway works, maintenance of circuits, and ensuring the safety of the entire railway operation. Some of the Luban Workshop training talents are railways professionals, so in the future, it will be more conducive to the future operation and maintenance of the Addis Ababa-Djibouti Railway, and then inject new impetus and vitality into the overall economic development of Djibouti.
Well, let's now go to Uche Okoronkwo for the latest business news. Uche.
Thank you, Beatrice. And coming up on Africa Live Biz, a Rwandese family sues Boeing over the deadly Ethiopian Airlines crash. And Nigeria plans a 50% tax hike to fund recently agreed wage increases for public servants.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's start off with that tragic plane crash. A Rwandese family has now sued U.S. airplane maker Boeing in connection with the Ethiopian Airlines crash that killed about 157 people. Now, the relatives of Jackson Musoni, a passenger on the ill-fated plane, have now filed a lawsuit in a United States federal court. They allege that Boeing's 737 MAX airliner had a design defect in its automated flight control system. Now, this resulted in the entire 737 MAX 8 fleet being grounded following the crash. This, of course, is the second crash in 5 months. The preliminary investigations have concluded that a flight control feature automatically activated before the airliner crashed. The flight control feature is meant to help prevent the plane from stalling. However, Boeing has unveiled fixes to the control system now linked to those crashes. Let's head to Nigeria now, where the government is considering raising taxes on goods and services by nearly 50% in order to meet the cost of the raise in public servants' wages. Now, last week, the National Assembly voted to increase public sector salaries nationwide. Analysts say this will put more pressure on Africa's largest economy, which of course spends almost half of its annual budget on wages. Here's CGTN's Philly Haza bringing us more from the nation's capital, Abuja.
Suleiman Abdul is a civil servant here in Abuja, but can't seem to provide enough for his wife and children daily. Now, after last week's vote in Nigeria's National Assembly to boost public sector wages, he's hopeful that his situation is about to improve.
Even with the current salary that is being paid, we struggle to pay school fees, we struggle to pay bills and utilities, we struggle to do to even put food on the table and pay the house rents. It's usually a tug of war. But I believe if it is increased and put into effect, it will go a long way in helping to fill all these gaps.
It's nearly impossible for many government agency workers to live above the World Bank's poverty line of $1.90 per day with a basic salary of at least $50 monthly. After more than 4 years of demands by labor unions for a pay rise, both chambers of the National Assembly agreed to boost the minimum wage of all government workers from $50 to about $83 a month. But the presidency says it will need to raise the value-added tax on all products and services by nearly 50% in order to afford the change, something economic experts strongly disagree with.
The contribution of VAT to 2019 budget is only 3%, 3+%. So even if you increase that by 100%, ceteris paribus, so that things being equal, what you have is only 6% plus. So 6% is not up to over 40% in recurrent expenditure to pay salaries. So the argument just does not make sense.
He says the government needs to focus more on expanding its means of revenue generation beyond oil exports in order to shore up earnings to pay workers.
What Nigeria needs is an exogenous income that is not determined by the current variables that we have, which would mean what is it that we are not earning from enough that we can earn from. This will act as a major boom and even boost the GDP.
In addition, experts say improved access to basic amenities such as clean water, health care and shelter would help sustain and improve the value of workers' income.
Now the decision rests with Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari and his economic team to ensure implementation of the minimum wage hike before his next administration starts on May 29. Until then, many government workers can only hope for better days ahead. Phil Ihaza, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Meanwhile, in Zambia, the government says it will delay replacing a value-added tax with a non-refundable sales tax for 3 months until July. The delay is expected to allow further consultations with the stakeholders as the new levy is scheduled to take effect in April. Now, this is meant to address the problem of taxpayers claiming back VAT, forcing the government into issuing refunds and thereby reducing revenue from the levy. Now, this is a major reform as the government continues to engage key stakeholders from both the public and private sector. And Kenya is not in a rush to secure a new standby credit facility with the International Monetary Fund. The previous arrangement, worth about $989.8 million, expired in September following the government's failure to meet the conditions of the extension, including, of course, the repeal cap on commercial lending. The government is set to issue a $2.5 billion Eurobond, which analysts argue could have better interest rates if the standby arrangement was in effect. According to the central bank, the country is still on course with its 6.3% economic growth. However, the current account deficit is expected to narrow down to 4.8% of GDP from an estimated 4.9% in 2018. The Apex Bank this week held the benchmark lending rate at 9%. And moving on, the Arab Maghreb Union has hosted a seminar in the Tunisian capital of Tunis to present the Trans-Maghreb Railway project. Now, the strategic venture is worth about $1.7 billion and will link Algeria, Morocco and Tunisia. It is aimed at promoting trade exchanges between the three Maghreb central countries and to ensure free movement of goods and services. Here's CGTN's Adnan Shaushi reporting.
The Arab Maghreb League announced the completion of the feasibility study of the Trans-Maghreb Rail project linking Algeria, Morocco and Tunisia.
The decision was made in 2014, but the project faltered until 2016. The study began and intensified in the past 2 years. Now we've reached the final phase of the study, which is the promotion of the Trans-Maghreb Railway.
The ambitious project is worth $1.7 billion. It will be funded by the African Development Bank.
The railway project aims to revamp rail transport in the Maghreb region. The construction of the Trans-Maghreb high-speed rail network is a regional project that aims to connect the main cities of the Maghreb countries, namely Casablanca, Algiers, Tunis, and Tripoli.
China's civil engineering construction corporation that built Tazara Railway, linking Tanzania and Zambia, is the main partner in this new Maghrebian project.
We want to find more good jobs, and we just want to cooperate with the local companies to boost the economic development.
The Tunisian section of the Trans-Maghreb high-speed line will have a total length of 840 kilometers. The project will later be extended to Libya and Mauritania. According to the Arab Maghreb Union, the new railway will be 2,350 kilometers long. This gigantic project, initiated in the 1990s, is aimed at promoting trade exchanges between the three Maghreb central countries and ensuring free movement of goods and services. Aden Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
And let's head to Egypt now, where a revolutionary vertical system is helping motorists there to find more spots to park their vehicles. The smart parking lots multiplies the number of cars that can fit into a single space, which of course is likely to ease the shortage of parking lots in the North African country. Take a look.
The Smart Park Garage is located 120 kilometers north of the capital, Cairo. On a parking lot that provides space for 2 cars, the garage vertically stacks up to 12 of them. The innovation uses a small parking lift and is seen as a possible solution by the locals who regularly struggle to find parking across the country.
This morning I kept looking for a parking space for my car and I couldn't find one. Of course, it's free of charge today, and I still don't know how much it's going to cost. But it does save time. We usually look for parking spaces all morning, and we normally don't find any in Mansoura. It's too crowded.
The smart parking lots are, however, rare to find outside the capital, Cairo.
It's a very good thing, and the idea is also new. I think this is the first time it's been done outside Cairo. I hope it expands, as it will help with the traffic crisis in Mansoura. It will be much better if there's more than one unit, so that will solve the crisis efficiently.
The automated system comes with a mobile application which allows people to reserve a space before reaching the parking lift. The new system is expected to decongest the cities whilst operating at pocket-friendly prices.
The cost is reasonable, so that we from the private sector are able to provide a service to the citizens through the cooperation between the private sector and the state. We were able to bring a product like this with land space provided by the state, even if it's a small piece of land. They are parking spaces that were already being used for car parking, but we can turn a parking space for 2 cars into a parking space for 20.
According to the World Bank, approximately $8 billion is wasted every year in Egypt due to traffic congestion, with the number expected to skyrocket to $18 billion by 2030. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz. But coming up on Global Business Africa, a day of reckoning in Britain as MPs seek to end the long-running impasse over withdrawal from the EU. Of course, we'll bring you more on that top of the hour. For now, it's back to you, Beatrice.
Uche, thank you. And we still have more news for you coming up in your sports. Here's what's ahead. African teams prepare for the 2019 World Cross Country Championship.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born. We're there for every goal, for every knockout, for every step of the way.
Match Point, only on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Uganda has lined up a strong contingent for the 2019 IAAF World Cross Country Championship due this weekend in Aarhus in Denmark. The 2007 hosts, Kenya, are ranked among the favorites to dominate the competition. Uganda's Joshua Cheptegei hopes for better results after his disastrous end during the 2017 championship in Uganda. CGTN's Leon Tenyange spent time with the athletes and filed the following story.
It was a disastrous ending for Joshua Cheptegei at the 2017 World Cross Country